Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are. Thank you so much for joining us on this wonderful session today, and we hope that you've been enjoying the EDGE conference. I certainly have. My name is Joseph Hanna. I'm actually the Director of Strategic Accounts here at MindBridge, and it's my very special pleasure to introduce two of our power users, colleagues, and I'd hope that they consider me friends as well. To start it, we have our Senior Manager of Audit Innovation, Adam Simmons. Adam's been with M&P for several years now, and he's an innovation lifecycle expert. He's been also previously in this consulting space and has a lot of great work with M&P as well as several other institutions. I'd also like to introduce Jeremy Belkins, who's also a senior manager of audit innovation, and is actually several roles prior to that. He was in their professional practices role. He also sits on the AATC, which is the CPA Canada Audit and Assurance Tech Committee. So with that, I'd like to introduce these fine gentlemen and enjoy their session. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks for the introduction, Joe. Pleasure to speak to it with everybody today, and thanks for MindBridge for inviting us to host this session today. So the session Adam and I are going to go through, and we're going to kind of go back and forth and share content with you today is insight-driven assurance. And this is something that we have, as a firm, have been working on, and something that we are starting to see, more active in not only the marketplace, but as well as within discussions with the standard setters as well. And so, insight-driven assurance is something that we've kind of put our stamp of or coin of terminology on. I'm sure other firms are starting to think of things in similar terms as well, and maybe just have different terminology to it. But that's what we're going to kind of go through today is sort of our take on that, what that really means for M&P, and sort of provide lessons learned. Really what it is a lot of what we have on the deck today, or the slides today, is if we're saying, do this, it's probably because we did that at one point in time. And so, there's a lot of, mistakes you make along the way. Adam and I have been working with MindBridge and adopting technologies into M&P now for going on probably 5 years. Prior to that, in the previous 12-ish years I was with M&P, I've been part of the methodology group, and I've seen sort of the evolution of the firm, as well as sort of how these technologies get adopted into the firm. And so, like I said, I'm hoping what you see in the deck today aren't platitudes, that these really are lessons learned. And so with that, we'll kind of move through the session here. So, I mean, Joe did a great introduction for us, so I'm not going to rehash our introductions, but just to reiterate, I mean, Adam and I have been doing this now for a while, and really, we've taken MindBridge from a point to which it was a POC within the firm, and then ultimately adopted it more broadly into the firm. And so we've been using it quite broadly across the entirety of the practice, and so we've seen a lot of different lessons. We've learned along the way what works and what doesn't work. And so with having said that, we'll kind of just jump into the session here. So what we hope to kind of cover today, time dependent here, is we'll actually start with some key takeaways, or we could also call those spoilers, but really summarizing kind of what we hope to communicate to you here today. Adam will go through the ideation and innovation part of the deck here. I'll talk about the implementation. So again, sort of our lessons learned. We'll talk about change management as being sort of a strategic pillar, and something that, if we're thinking about areas that we have learned, significantly on over the last few years, is sort of the change management process. Then we'll go through the skills in the changing environment. That maybe is a little bit more philosophical, what needs to be occurring at firms, and what we're seeing. And then some takeaways for you as firms or organizations. So what's next? So in our mind, sort of what are some of the key items that can help you move this forward? And I'll be totally frank right now. I mean, when we're going through the deck, we're not providing M&P's methodology. What we're doing is talking about sort of the ecosystem and the foundation that we took to build this. I could, provide M&P's methodology in the chat, and it still wouldn't really help adopt a lot of this stuff. A lot of this is about sort of the peoples and process, and as I alluded to, the change that needs to occur in order for this to really take hold across an organization. So with the key takeaways, there's a few kind of key items here that we do have listed. So really, I mean, defining what insight-driven assurance really is for the firm. I could again give M&P's definition to that, but really it's not about what M&P's definition is or any one firm's definition. It really is what your firm's definition of this is. And so, if I were to think of a summary, and sort of, I think of it as, an intersection between data and professional judgment. So leveraging the insights that you might have from something like MindBridge, but as well as is augmenting the skills of an auditor or an engagement team. And so it's really that sort of intersection that really occurs. Some other things, I do just want to quickly highlight is you'll see these things come up over and over again, but really, leadership buy-in. It's really critical to make sure that everybody is on the same page as this sort of process is, being adopted across the firm. And, it's not just about, having leadership buy-in, but it's about buy-in at all levels really, and it's collaboration at all levels. And so, without that level of collaboration, there will be struggles to really get traction on this. What we found in the past is like you can adopt some of these tools and technologies and stuff, but if you don't really sort of have everybody buying into what your vision is or what the firm's vision is they just see it being another technical solution towards something that they have in their toolkit. And really, that's not where we want to get to. We want to get to a changing environment where people feel empowered to be able to use the data, the insights, the generation to then, inform their engagements and have a better path. And then, so some of the other things that we'll also talk about here is refining methodologies. And again, we won't go specifically through what M&P's methodology is, but just how you kind of go through that refinement of methodologies. And I know Danielle has another section later in the day talking about the changing standards and those standards stimulating the use of technologies more so than they have in the past. And those standards might not say specifically, thou must do this technology or this must be the process. But what they've done is they've opened up. They've really opened up and said, you could use a technology in this process. And so as a firm, it's about being reflective of that and saying, okay, well, what does that mean actually with my methodology? And what does that mean for my process? And so again, just if I'm thinking, kind of again, key themes here is like self-awareness. And when I say self-awareness, I'm not speaking self-awareness as you as an individual, but as a firm. Are you self-aware as a firm? Like where do you fit within sort of this broad spectrum of adoption of technologies and processes? Do you fall behind? Do you find yourself, sort of sitting on the laggard side of the curve, waiting for things to be adopted? Or do you sit more on the leading edge and you're willing to take sort of your bumps and bruises and your lessons learned along the way? But in doing so, you're moving so more quickly. And so really being sort of introspective as a firm and just really being aware of where you are sort of within this, fundamental shift in the profession. Because really we're sort of at this nexus point where things are changing from what they've been in the past with sort of, your Sally, same as last year processes, and moving more into this, what could we do different? Is there a way to innovate? And is there a way to really, fundamentally change the way we do engagements? And so that's kind of the way we're thinking about it. And that's, as we go through the deck today, that's kind of what we want to communicate with you is sort of like setting that sort of understanding and how do you move forward in the process. So with having said all that, I'm going to hand it over to Adam to take care of the ideation and the innovation and sort of the percolation of these ideas and how you move forward. And then I'll pick up thereafter.
Thanks, Jeremy. And yes, there's going to be a lot of recurring themes throughout this presentation. So there might be some repetition to some of the points, but we really took the time to fine tune the advice and information in this deck. It's all lived experience from both myself and Jeremy, as well as the assurance innovation team here at M&P and the assurance practice as a whole. So there's a lot of value in kind of the slides going forward. So as a firm and as leaders here at this conference aspiring to move towards insight-driven assurance, it really helps if you can start with first principles thinking to help you in your decision-making, getting to the core of the question, finding out what's really true about your organization. So I'm going to start by asking a series of questions. And as an exercise, I hope that audience members will take time to think about your organization and kind of what percolates or what comes up in this process, and don't judge that information at its surface. Just kind of take that information in and carry it throughout this presentation, and hopefully you'll learn some things and throughout the process. So first of all, definition. What is insight-driven assurance, and what does it mean for your organization? You want to define it and set guardrails around it so that you can help define your efforts, so that you're not lost in the woods starting around and not sure where to go. It needs to be right for your organization. Business objectives. So what are your key business objectives? What do you want to accomplish with an insight-driven assurance initiative that you're going through? Coordination. What stakeholders within your organization do you need to coordinate with? Your methodology teams, your information technology teams, your assurance teams, your innovation teams. And most importantly, as Jeremy mentioned earlier, what key leaders do you need to get buy-in from in order to move this forward? Analysis. So what is in scope for the first phase of this project? We want to make sure that we're picking pieces of the puzzle that we can start with, that we can get a lot of return on investment from, and that we can be successful with, so that we can build upon that. So make sure that you're trying to focus on quick wins initially instead of trying to boil the whole ocean, so that you can build on those smaller wins as you move forward. Another consideration is planning. So what constraints will your organization experience when implementing the changes that you want to implement? And later we'll talk a bit more about change management as this really comes into play. Will you have access to the data? Are your timelines reasonable given your teams and your peoples and your process? How will you get your teams ready and receptive to accept this change and to be champions of this change? And also keeping in mind that this isn't just a tool that you just implement and you kind of move forward and start using it. It really is a fundamental shift in the way that we do business, right? So, artificial intelligence is really changing the way that we make decisions and glean insight. And so it is a fundamental shift, and it doesn't occur overnight, and it is a continuous process. So it's more so going on a journey rather than just buying a technology off the shelf and plugging it into your workflow. And so it's also important to help your organization frame what artificial intelligence is, especially within the context of our world, which is the assurance space. Many times we've heard wildly varying opinions about what AI can do for our assurance engagement work. On one extreme, we hear that, AI will do all the work for me, and when they get the tool and it doesn't do all the work for them, they're quite upset about that. And then in other situations, team members will think that AI can't be trusted and my clients are too unique. And so in truth, AI in its current form is very good at doing very specific things for you. And MindBridge is pretty good at outlining exactly what that is and how they get to those conclusions and showing the math and steps that get you there to reproduce it. Things that are repetitive and require large volumes of data processing, it'll help you with that, but it won't replace thinking for you. And so it's useful to think of AI as something that will augment your work rather than automate it or even replace it. It's a powerful tool to help us ask even better questions and to get answers quicker. And if we can really start to think about it this way and help our team members think about it this way, then we can get value out of tools like MindBridge much quicker. And that's something that we definitely have had to work with our team members to get that kind of understanding across. And so some things that we should also consider when we're aiming to generate insights from an application like MindBridge. What kind of application challenges are we going to encounter? How would insight generation work within our methodology and the application of the audit risk model? How will teams get credit for the insight that they're generating from tools like MindBridge so that we can incentivize its use and make sure that it's truly integrated into our methodology and our audit risk model. What about assurance technical considerations? So beyond substantive analytics, where else can audit data analytics be integrated into the methodology? And also consider risk analysis. So consider where reliance on audit data analytics tools will have different impacts on the risk of relying on those considerations within the process. And having considering these things, MindBridge is well positioned to provide your teams with actionable insight. So insight generation with MindBridge, you have full control for users to ingest data, validate any insights that are generated, allows you to get a fuller picture, especially when teams are using MindBridge year over year, which we started getting to a cycle now being able to do that. And teams are able to get year over year analytics and start to see trends across their clients, which would have been quite difficult in the past. And also ease of application. This is something that's often overlooked in the industry. These applications should be relatively easy to use and shouldn't require team members to become data scientists or experts in any kind of programming. And MindBridge does a really good job of providing that out-of-the-box data science technology without team members having to become data scientists themselves. And we also should consider that our profession is changing. We're experiencing higher turnover than ever before. And AI is really positioned to positively impact practitioners at your profession, as we've experienced at ours, and as able to impact the profession as a whole. It reduces and in some cases removes low value and redundant tasks, which improves efficiency. And it removes redundant tasks. AI allows the practitioner to refocus on the client and any key risks. There's also room that's created from this refocusing and increased efficiency on upskilling and allowing team members to focus more on interpretation and judgment of the data that they're seeing, which allows team members to increase their skills and abilities within this field. And as that upskilling starts to happen within your organization and across the profession, we would also see an increase in scope of what we're able to unlock in terms of the analysis and the scale at which we can unlock those insights within our clients and our niches and as a profession as a whole. And all this really leads to our profession evolving as a whole. As we, work directly with vendors like MindBridge and our profession and other firms, we're able to make great strides in evolving our profession and changing how we do our work. And all this results, as I was mentioning it, in the evolution of the practitioner. So it's really important to consider how we're going to boost human capital. So as organizations, it's critical that we enable our existing staff and new staff with the skills that they'll need to succeed in this new environment. One of the big ones is data literacy that we've learned. This is one that you don't want to avoid or ignore. It's critical that we have teams that are enabled with data literacy so that they can generate new insights and be creative and really be comfortable with understanding the data that they're using and putting into these analytics processes so that they understand what they're getting out in terms of insight generation. It really helps team members be creative with the work that they're doing and how they get to the answers. Enabling team members with machine learning tools, offering team members a starting point. Oftentimes it's quite daunting to get started in this area for team members. So making sure that we focus on a specific point or use case within the process to allow teams to adapt and grow through this process. And as we invest in our practitioners and their growth, we can help our practitioners reposition how they perform their work so that they're not in a position where they feel like their jobs are being replaced by AI, which is, the fallacy that we kind of learned about years ago, but it'll really help reposition their role, and the role dynamics are going to change going forward. And so here at M&P, we are establishing a robust ecosystem that supports our current and future implementations of an insight-driven assurance. Our process is we first evaluate a series of vendors and technologies in the market, and this is a continuous process. So we could actually have a little loop that went to the end and came back around to evaluate here, but we're continuously evaluating technologies across different vendors, but also within the same vendor. So like with MindBridge, MindBridge is always evolving and adapting and listening to its customers and adding additional functionality. And so we're all continuously evaluating those functionality opportunities, limitations. We're then distilling, so we're taking pieces that have high return on investment opportunities for us. And we work through the technical implementation challenges of how would we actually get this up and running for team members, and kind of what do we anticipate as potential pitfalls. And then once we've determined that, we execute a proof of concept and or a pilot. So in the case of MindBridge, executing a pilot that focuses on the particular use case, and work with our teams to figure out any lessons learned or gained through that process. An example of that, so at M&P, we started with journal entry testing, and it was a small start, but it really helped us resolve technical challenges, gain lessons, and helped us refine our methodology, which ultimately allows us to stack additional wins and additional functionality on top for our team members so that they can absorb it in a way that they can implement it. And I'll pass it off to Jeremy to talk about implementation of that at the pilot phase.
Perfect, thanks, Adam. I'll just advance through my slides here. So I think, I will talk about it a bit from the pilot phase, but as well as a sort of broader implementation. And, if I'm being, fully honest and truthful here, we did take it from a journal entry testing perspective, but that was actually after, a false start or two where this idea, and it wasn't called insight-driven assurance at the time, terminology was bubbling up in the profession about 5 years ago, around data analytics and audit data analytics. And I know a lot of firms were having conversations with each other, and that started to make its way up to sort of the C-suite and the executives. And there was a lot of push to just adopt data analytics. And I think, it was good to have the conversation, but the conversation was had, sometimes without a purpose. And really this, over the last few years, we've been kind of refining our purpose. So when you do something like this, like with like a data analytic, why are you doing that? Like, and to Adam's point back about the audit risk model, if I do this, what's the impact on the engagement? Can I reduce my sampling? Can I take a different path? Is there a happy path for this engagement that if I use analytics that really does have value? And so, trying to remove some of the froth or the buzz that exists in the profession, in the industry, and really distilling it down to, where is the value? I think Adam pointed out earlier. So where is your return on investment? Ultimately, a lot of this stuff is driven by business decisions. And what we shouldn't be doing is chasing, technical applications and then hoping to find a business problem. We should always, lead with the business problem. And that could be, trying to solve something with an engagement, and then solutioning with applications or vendors or partnerships, or even building something internally within the own firm. but really having a purpose and trying to remove that sort of excitement that existed out there in the market a few years ago. And there obviously there's advantages to that excitement existing. I mean, I'm sure MindBridge probably wouldn't be here today had that that froth kind of existed a few years ago. But then working through the process and ultimately making sure that there's value on all sides of the fence, right, for the firms as well as everyone here. So with having said all of that, I mean, Adam talked about so how do you ideate? How do you really get these things going? And it does start with sort of that not to use the same word, but that idea. How do you get something and really start to percolate it across the firm? And then how do you take it through the mechanisms? And so things I just kind of wanted to talk about is like, practically, how do you get that going? And something that we found, and especially myself over the last few years, is there's a lot of guidance out there. There's a lot of professional bodies, regulators, standard setters, all these everybody has the same motivations and the same interests. But what we found is a lot of that information has been, sort of disaggregated and lives in different places. And so taking that time to really understand what's out there, how that information impacts your firm, being just aware of the market even in general, knowing that, an organization like MindBridge exists to solve problems A, B, and C, and really, starting to lace those pieces together. And then you're going to start to, as you progress through, when you start to move things out of your containered environment where you're in a POC or a pilot, and you start to do broader adoption, you are going to have to come, up against regulators at a certain point in time, or likely will have to. And really being able to defend your decisions. So do you have a real fundamental understanding of why it is you're doing what is you're doing, and the process and the technology in behind behind that process? And so, from our perspective, the way we did some of this is we worked with MindBridge to set up containered environments. We have containered environments for education. We have containered environments for user acceptance testing, playground, and then we actually have like a live production environment. So then when features come live, we're able to test those features before they ever actually hit production. We work with Sanjay and Joe there to really, work through those application changes, really understand it for ourselves. And, and if we have to pull something back, I mean, MindBridge is pretty feature rich and being able to toggle things on and off. And so if we're not comfortable in having something on from our own perspective, then we toggle that off. And so then when you start to have to stand in front of a regulator, you can say, we take it through this gating mechanism. We don't release something until we're comfortable with it, as a firm, and that we understand the process. And so really making sure that you have control and ownership over the process, and that you're not just like haphazardly releasing things. And, that can really get you into some of those pitfalls early on if you're having to stand in front of somebody and say, well, I wish I knew better for you, but I really don't know. Really having those mechanisms in order to have that in place. And then I talked about this earlier, but being really just introspective as a firm, knowing that this is something that you obviously want to take on, and you can do it in a measured way, knowing that your leadership is going to have the back of you as an organization or as a team to build this. But what this really can't be is as it grows, it can't be more than just a side of desk job. You really have to have buy-in at all different levels that this is something that we actually want to push forward on, and that this is something that we want to achieve. And the other part of that equation too is that they understand that this isn't just a flip of a switch or an overnight shift, that everybody understands and has that same level understanding that at the outset, you're going to go through, you're going to fail. Some things are going to work better than others, but you're going to constantly recalibrate and change how you're kind of approaching the equation or the question as you try and address this sort of broader, like I said, we'll call it the IDA, or the insight-driven assurance. And then lastly, sort of the limits of methodology, like to my point earlier with, and Daniel's talk, I think later today, was the standards are stimulating the use of these technologies more. But a lot of firms are sitting on legacy methodologies that are, probably 20, 30-ish plus years old. And so some of those need to be revisited. You need to really go to the core of that, or first principles, and really understand, okay, if I change this, what does that really mean for our practice? And again, if I change it, can I defend it, and have that sort of documented process for yourself? So, I mean, those are kind of the challenges you have to work through. But I mean, this is sort of like a bit of a framework that we've kind of come up with. You could have a lot more information on here, but here's sort of, you know, if I'm thinking of this in terms as we kind of set it like a foundation. So we decide, you know, and at that foundation is collaboration. And now this will change depending on your organization. Obviously, we'll scale depending on your organization. But M&P, we've gotten quite large, and so we have separate teams for education. We have separate teams for methodology. We actually now exist as ourselves as an actual innovation group. So we actually have our own business unit where we are with the goal of making the firm more innovative, and with, you know, whether that's, you know, we don't want to say higher quality because it implies that quality was lower in some place, but, you know, coming at things from a more efficient perspective, and really building out, you know, a future forward and now perspective. But making sure that that collaborative layer exists, and that collaborative layer really doesn't exist without all the buy-in as well, right? So if, you know, methodology doesn't buy into what innovation's doing, then you're kind of at a stalemate. If L&D doesn't want to take it across the finish line and actually publish it as far as materials to the firm, again, you're kind of at a stalemate. And so really understanding all the stakeholders that are there and setting that at the start and then kind of pushing forward. We have methodology kind of in the middle here where, you know, at the core of it, obviously that's kind of what drives your engagements. And so making sure that everything is kind of reflected back in that methodology in some terms, that, you know, there's actual actionable items for team members to take forward. The concern with a lot of this is, you know, you pick an area, right? So in our case, we started too broad, then we went back and we went to journal entry testing. The risk is you get stuck in journal entry testing because people don't understand the broader scope of what it is you're trying to accomplish. And so, you know, you end up with a journal entry testing tool. Great journal entry testing tool, but that's not fundamentally probably where you want to be as an organization, right? You want to start there and then you want to build out from there. And so really having that framework kind of built upon to be able to accomplish something like that. And then there's the scalability here, and I think Robin yesterday talked about scalability at MindBridge, but scalability is obviously important at any organization, and particularly for us as we want to build this insight-driven assurance. You can do analytics at any point in time. You know, if you're wanting to build bespoke and one-off analytics, fine. But that's, you know, for us, that wasn't the name of the game. The name of the game was how do we do this in large volumes? We have lots of clients, and we can't be sitting here doing these one-off engagements all the time. And so how do you do this, you know, at scale? And so there's a lot of lessons learned from scaling this. And, you know, from our standpoint is and I'm likewise probably for a lot of your firms is there's frameworks that you probably work off of, right? There's probably some sort of common data model. There's probably some sort of mapping framework, and being able to leverage that, because once you can start to leverage that, you can start to just, you know, repeat the process a bit more from an implementation standpoint. Now, at the engagement level, obviously everybody needs to do their own insight generation, but at least you can get the ball rolling for them such that they can kind of move forward in the process. And then just to, you know, from an implementation standpoint, something that we chose as a firm and something that was important to us was in the red bubble on the left there was providing analytics at the practitioner level. This was something that we fundamentally decided very early on that we wanted to enable people as much as we possibly could to be able to do their own analytics. There's kind of, in my mind, there's two ways to approach this, plus there's probably a spectrum in between. You can either go with a center of excellence approach where you provide a sophisticated tool. To Adam's point earlier, you can enable them they could be data scientists, they could be whatever, and they could get really good at analytics, and you might have a dozen or so people doing all that. We went the flip side of that where we said, okay, what is a tool that's, you know, mature? What is something that everybody could probably use, that we could train them on relatively quickly on, and move them quickly through the process such that they could understand it. And the reason for that is, you know, if we're saying that this is a fundamental shift in the profession, that people are going to be doing more analytics, that you're going to be doing more insight. Well, if I centralize all the skills within a dozen people, I have 2,000 other engagement practitioners that are now lacking in those skills or will be lacking in those skills over time. And so that really, you know, didn't mesh with where we saw this going. We really wanted to enable those people. We know it's going to be an uphill grind. We know that, you know, they need to you know, be upskilling through the process, that, you know, we'll probably have to remessage things a lot of times, that it's probably not the easiest path, but it's probably the more protective path and for the firm and for the profession in the long run. And I think people get more value out of the work they do, with the idea being we remove the heavy lift for them, and we really get them to the insight generation as fast as we can. So they're not, if I'm thinking in terms of, vouching or ticking and tying, I'm not doing that manual sort of grunt work. I'm doing, the next layer up where I'm actually able to do the insight generation. And so you're able to mature your more junior staff more quickly, as well as pair them up with more senior staff where they're able to actually look at the insights together. So that was, that was our approach. I mean, again, it's an approach. You could go back to the Center of Excellence, but I will promote this as much as I can. That I think, as a profession, I do think people need to be building these skills for themselves, and I do think this needs to come from not only the universities, but as well as the CPA profession, and then on the firms and partnering with vendors to build these skills out for individuals. So with having said all that, I'm going to hand it over to Adam to talk about a key piece here, which is the change management part.
Thanks, Jeremy. And change management, wow, we've only got a few minutes to talk about this one, but really everything that we talked about so far doesn't happen without change management. And it's one of the key slides in this deck is right here, where people and process, we find, makes up about 70% of the change that we're looking to achieve. And so technology and specialized algorithms, about 30%. So as leaders, before we roll out a technology like MindBridge, we need to consider what our change management strategy is going to be, and how we're going to support that process. People and process is often the most overlooked aspect of change, but again, it's the most important part, full stop. Many times when a technology rollout fails, it's not just because of the technology. I mean, there's definitely parts of it. I mean, we definitely had a point where we tried, and really, when you think about it, it was a change management issue. We tried to do too much change at once. When you're trying to boil the whole ocean and try to cover too much ground at once, what you're doing is you're not allowing your people and your process to catch up to the change. And so it's really important that you consider your people and process and any kind of change that you're going to make, and that, can you support that? Can your people and your process support those changes? And again, it's really our people and process that leverage this technology like MindBridge. So if we want to reap the benefits we're after, we have to make sure that our people and process can support that change. Oh, thanks. So what does effective change management look like? Just in the center here, first we need to really decide the scope of change, and that's really critical. We should be honest with ourselves about only implementing changes that our organization can support. Without the support of our people and process, we won't be able to leverage the change that we're after. Some things that we found helpful in this process, and by no means did we get this right in the beginning, and by no means are we experts in this, but try to collaborate, talk to your people, create cross-department working groups through Teams, through video chat, through in-person, if you can manage that as well. Some decentralized groups in different regions is a really helpful way to do that, and you get champions and leaders in areas. Discuss the potential changes and document any considerations or concerns that you get from that group. That's really going to help you inform your strategy of change management and what aspects you're going to address first in your planning. Communication, you could probably summarize change management to just communication. That's really better. Communication is always desirable. Assigning a dedicated communications liaison to craft and deliver messages affected by the change. Like Jeremy said earlier, change management should not be well, many aspects of this, but change management should not be off the side of the desk kind of thing. And so we think it's valuable to actually hire or assign someone specifically to communicate those change messages, because oftentimes it's difficult for leaders to be the ones to initiate some of these communication campaigns. And target. So make sure that the messages being sent will be received by the individuals that they are being sent to. And the way we do that is we make those messages targeted and specific to how those changes are going to solve their problems specifically. Leveraging use cases is a really valuable way to do that. And then lead. So ensure top leaders in the firm set the tone by sending out organization-wide messages to frame the key changes. So oftentimes leaders don't have time to communicate all this, but again, working with communication liaisons to get those messages out in some kind of a routine cycle to help the organization understand what changes we're doing and why. And finally, some of the lessons learned from within M&P come down to about 5 different key factors that we lean on for change management. So communicate, we want to notify teams early of any changes that are coming. Champions, we want to assign champions to promote adoption. Education. Oh, sorry, guys. Education, try to provide training and support to teams prior to launch and throughout the pilot. Monitor usage by region, so get the statistics of how things are being done. And then finally, marketing, so launching internal campaigns. I'm going to hand it over to Jeremy to speak about skills in changing environment.
Perfect, thanks, Adam. Well, I'm going to just do a quick one here through the skills, just because we've been talking about this, and I do want to kind of get to sort of lessons learned and you know what are next steps for your organizations or your firms. But you know, as we talked about, you know, our approach and what it meant, you know, we wanted to upskill the vast majority of our users and our practitioners, and so really that means building, you know, upon their sort of core concepts or their core, you know, skills, and really layering them into the next level of critical thinking. And so, as Adam talked about earlier, that you know, that's data literacy, that's being able to read and generate from insights. It's you know, it's really critical thinking, as we have it on the slide there. It's sort of that next level thinking, and really that's what we want to be freeing people up when we adopt these tools and these processes, is to move them into that critical thinking phase. And really, from a firm perspective, that's really just committing to doing that, and committing to seeing that go through. It's not a one and done type of process where you know, you can kind of set it and forget it. So again, like I said, I'm just going to move through these kind of quickly so we can get to some questions at the end here. And this slide was more, you know, sort of a philosophical question and debate about where does this all land? What does this look like as this moves into the future? You know, do teams get kind of redistributed where, you know, the auditor becomes the expert, and really the person on the engagement team is more experienced in analytics or information technology? And I don't really have an answer for you to this question. I don't know how this looks going forward, but I do know a lot of the different bodies and stuff, and working groups within the professions are talking about these types of things. And you know, I don't think they have the right answers as well, but I do know in some of the large Big Four firms that some of this is being relooked at, and some of this distribution's being handled in that way. So just something to be mindful of. And again, if I'm thinking back, be introspective about is, you know, what does this look like going into the future? And so really, you know, what's next? How do you move forward in some of this? And we've been talking about this throughout, but how do you move forward in this, you know, this IDA approach here? But, you know, really understanding the scope of what it is you're trying to achieve. And as Adam said, not trying to boil the whole ocean at once. So starting having a level set understanding at the outset. Once you have that understanding of where you want to go, really being focused on that, you know, focusing towards what you want to achieve overall. we have this in kind of a funnel diagram, but this isn't necessarily a linear process. This can kind of be, almost a loop or a circular diagram here as well. But, once you have that sort of foundational process that you're hoping to build out and strategize upon is recognizing those constraints. Like if going back to the collaboration, if collaboration doesn't exist, trying to fix that within the organization before you really try and move this forward, because it really could fall into a pitfall where it gets trapped within a certain group that never bought in at the outset, right? Maybe for whatever reason you weren't able to get them on board, and now they're the ones kind of holding this back from really being achieved. And so just being mindful of that and being strategic about that. And that could also be strategic about where you want to grow it as far as different areas of the engagement as well. And then the last couple are just being open and being willing to recalibrate. And we've said this a couple times, but failure is going to happen. By no means are you going to get from the start to the finish without ever making any mistakes in this process. And believe me, we've made lots, and we continue to make lots. But in doing so, we also have the backing of our leadership and other team members within the firm that understands that this is a process. And if we got it wrong at one point in time, we will recalibrate and we will adjust such that we can take those lessons learned and we can get better. What I can say is if you sit on the starting line for some of this and wait for all the problems to be solved, you're going to be standing on the starting line for a very long time. A lot of those lessons learned have to come from the doing part of this, and that will be unique to each organization and each firm. The doing can't be obtained from reading guidance or any of that kind of stuff. The doing is really putting the rubber to the road and actually making actionable steps forward. There was a lot of processes that we had in place that we understood that we were going to have to refine after it as we started to move forward. And so really what, again, just this almost just reiterates on the past slide, but it's really about just getting that ball rolling and understanding it's a journey. And being mindful, and I probably couldn't understate this enough, but being mindful just of the ecosystem. What is that overall goal? What are those foundational blocks that you're trying to build here towards that overall goal? And how are you going to layer those in? What is the firm's approach with regards to technology? Are you a build shop? Are you a buy shop? I assume if you're here, you're considering buying to some degree. Are you on the spectrum of build, buy? And really being mindful of that, when you start to bring all these processes together, really being introspective about what does that look like for the firm, and then that can also change. You can change your strategy. I mean that's a really important thing to be mindful of as well. And whether you want to put that into the failure bucket or not is as new information comes to light, your strategy might change, and just really being aware that you can change your strategy, but having a strategy to execute your change in strategy is also really important. And so really just, thinking of all those different layers about how you move this forward. And as I said earlier, I mean, this isn't about M&P providing our secret sauce and telling you how to do, what our methodology is about how to adopt MindBridge. And what I would say is, what I find missing in the profession is a playbook, and what we tried to capture here more was this sort of playbook approach where, had I thought about some of these things at the outset, and had we had the understanding of everybody at the outset, we probably could have saved a lot of time. And I don't think we would have gotten rid of all our failures. Actually, I will say for certainty we wouldn't have gotten rid of all our failures, but perhaps we would have maybe shortened the timelines on some of those like pain points or failures. Maybe we would have relieved some of those. So really just thinking about this from a playbook standpoint about how you want to bring this forward as a firm. So with having said all that, I mean, that takes us to the end of our presentation. We did leave some times for Q&A here. And it looks like some questions are coming in here. Adam, just as I'm talking, maybe you can read and see if you can address those.
Yeah, we've got question. Tell me a bit about how you educated or approached helping staff adopt MindBridge. So I mean, one of the big things we did was we actually created our own internal knowledge base. So we created a SharePoint online site and broke down everything from getting started to some of the more advanced functionality that we were launching with MindBridge. So that was one piece of it. We also did a number of training sessions hosted with both Mindbridge and ourselves internally. And we also had educational content go out through our internal MNPU site, where team members had to go through and use demo files to go from start to finish running an engagement through Mindbridge. So we tried to kind of give people multiple levels of opportunity to absorb the information in, and this all happened prior to kind of launching for a pilot initially, and then expanding all those resources to the rest of the firm that was going to adopt this in more outside of a pilot, but in a full launch. Just got that one question there, David. Is there any more?
Just one here on how does Mindbridge help MMP become a leader in technology?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. You know, if you're thinking of it from like an ecosystem standpoint, I mean, we've been working with Mindbridge now going on, it's got to be about 5 years. We do this from like what we would consider like a best of breed approach, where we only bring the best applications, or in our mind, the best applications into our environment. And so we will often do, as Adam showed in the slide there, there's the when we pilot things or we POC things, we might actually be POCing or piloting against 4 or 5 different vendors or applications, and we take that and we boil down and really understand sort of the business aspect or the business problem of it, and whether that vendor or that solution is going to, you know, address those business problems. And so Mindbridge, you know, by and large solved a lot of those business problems for us. It was a, you know, super robust platform. You know, we could take a small engagement through, we could take a large engagement through, and it really gave us that breadth and that sort of trust that, you know, if we're bringing large volumes of clients onto this, that we're not going to get caught in all these sort of traps of, oh, you can't use it in this instance, oh, you can't use it in this instance. And it really just provides a robust ecosystem that serves the majority of the users' needs. Hopefully that answered the question. Any more questions, David?
That's all it is, Jeremy. Thank you very much.
Okay, perfect. With that being said, you know, thanks everybody for your time, and I'll hand it back to the Mindbridge staff to wind down the session here.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Jeremy and Adam. Really appreciated this. This is a very, very informative conversation, and certainly presentation from you and from MMP. We look forward to seeing you again soon, and hope that the attendees on this session will be able to move on to the next session and get more out of today's presentations. Thank you very much.